Leading and serving in church is hard enough as it is.
Things get even more difficult when you're dealing with negative church staff.
This might be just one person who's a bit of a problem, or it might be an overall attitude that's infected the culture.
This is 8 ways to deal with negative church staff members.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tool Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. We call him Father Freestyle. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello, hello.
And today, we are going through how to deal with a negative church staff. Before we dive into that, we've got an exciting announcement to make, and that is
that I'm taking up swimming again coming into this
yes,
new year.
Father Freestyle.
You've spoken it into
It's not
existence.
related to his ability to spit rhymes, but more his ability to improvise different swimming strokes.
The freestyle was my racing stroke of choice. So
Freestyle just means that you're doing front stroke,
crawl,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
It's
front
just
crawl.
it's just it's the speed swimming lingo for it. Yeah.
Okay. Exciting announcement to share. We have a new product launching very shortly. It is launching on January the 16th.
That's the date I was going to say.
16th. And it is
It's got to
called-
launch on the 16th now. We've said it. So.
Yes, true. It is called Portraits by Social Sermons. And when I shared this new product, this new idea with Alex, he said something along the lines of, "How are you doing this?"
I said, and I quote, "How are you going to pull this off?"
Yeah, which it's a good product when that's how people are challenging you.
Yeah.
And basically being like, like, sure, it'd be great, but
Yes.
but how?
Yeah.
So the simple idea for this is custom social media content from in-person photo shoots. So we will actually,
Right. How are you going to pull this off?
every 90 days, send a photographer to your church to do a photo
It's
shoot.
not me, is it?
It's not you. No. You're still on parental leave. We will then use those photos to develop custom social media content for your church. And then every 90 days, we'll repeat it so that the photos are always fresh and the social media content is always fresh. You can go to socialsermons.com/portraits to join the waiting list. socialsermons.com/portraits to join the waiting list. And you can see a little teaser of some examples on there. And then in the YouTube video that we published yesterday on the main channel, we dive in a bit into portraits at the very end of that YouTube video. But it's really exciting. One of the things that we've always been not able to do is we can only create based on what a church maybe sends us.
Mm-hmm.
With a main Social Sermons subscription, which you don't need to sign up for portraits. We're relying on your video quality, your recorded sermon. Here, we actually will send someone to you, and this is going to open up a whole new world of what's possible. I haven't felt this energized about something new. I guess since last year,
Social Sermons.
when we launched Social Sermons. So it's incredibly exciting. Socialsermons.com/portraits. We'll have a launch discount for 1 week only, starting next week, January
16th.
That's right. For 1 week only. Limited spots available. I haven't made a decision yet on if registration will close at the end of that week or if the price will just increase. You can pay annually. You can pay monthly. We can get a bit into the actual launch details coming soon, but join the waiting list. Watch out for it. Custom social media content from in-person photo shoots.
Well, it's so great because we talk a lot about social strategies for churches. We talk about short form video and we teach you how to do it. And churches are like, well, can you just do it for us? Yes, we can. Social sermons. And we talk a lot about the types of photos you should be posting on social and on your website, not stock photos. Folks are like, that sounds great, but how do I do this? And
hey, good luck.
Yeah, and so now we can do it for you. I was to that thing about stock photos. We talk a lot about social media and your website and not putting stock photos of really anything on there, but especially people, in the same way that if you looked up a restaurant and they showed you photos of the food and it was stock photos, that would kind of put you off because that's not what you're going to get when you go to the place. I saw someone tweet the other day and say, can churches stop posting or using their photos from Easter and on all of their social posts and all of their websites, because that's not the complexion of your church, on a Sunday in August.
Yeah.
And so this is so great for Portraits by Social Sermons. You're going to get a recurring photo shoots. You're going to get new photos every 90 days, you said, to use. So you get the whole complexion of what your church looks like, what your services look like, not just on those cornerstone services.
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to give you access to all those photos to use in your own church, different creative applications, different projects. But then we're also using those photos to develop videos and custom social media content And yeah, we don't want, to be posting in April and people are wearing winter coats, right? So every 90 days you redo it. Oh, it's winter. And well, that looks really summery in these photos.
Right.
So every 90 days, great stuff. Okay, let's get into 8 ways to deal with negative church staff. Number 1 is to set the standard yourself. One of my rules for parenting, might be the most important rule really, is that most of what kids will learn is going to come from you and what you model. Basically, it's being picked up through osmosis.
Isn't
it's
that
the
frightening?
Yeah, it is. It's frightening unless you're like, you know what though? I know that I am on the right trajectory,
Right.
and I don't have to actively. This is how I always think of it. It's the old caught not taught adage. Like sometimes I feel like I should be teaching this thing. I should be like explicitly outlining this type of thing, and sometimes we do that. But then a lot of the times I remind myself, okay, you just looked up at your parents. They had a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
They were healthy people. They loved themselves. They loved each other. They loved others, and you caught all of that through the process of living in their home for 18 years. And so anytime I feel deficient in explicit teaching and like, we're not going through good curriculum.
Right.
I'm like, you know what? They're going to pick things up.
gotta live
they
it
just
out.
watch me. Like my children have a terrible diet, unlike your children.
Well, you'd be surprised.
But I keep telling myself, okay, if I eat well myself and I model that, healthy eating, they will pick it up over time.
Over time, that's the most important part.
Then we got 18 years,
Yes.
at least.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm eating terribly, then they're going to start picking things up. So we have like a rule. Like here's one example. Like with Lil, we try one treat a day.
Yeah.
That we try. And there are days where like she's like, Dad, you just ate like 3 treats. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't
see that.
I was like, I didn't have any all week.
That's
And
when you get to say, I'm 3 times your size.
I use that all the time. Yeah. So like
It's proportionate.
one of our favorite snacks in the house, and I eat this like right now after most dinners, is I'll take an English muffin, I'll cut it in half, I'll toast it up, spread a little bit of Nutella on it. That's like my snack in the night. Yeah. Nice, good carbs and a little bit of a treat. It's like the commercials say. It's a hint of cocoa, people. It's mostly nuts.
Yeah.
Liars.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty sure they sneak some icing sugar in there too.
yeah. Let's not look at the ingredients. Oh, Lil loves it.
Yeah.
So like I'll make myself, and she's like, why don't I get a whole English muffin? I'm like, I weigh 5 times what you weigh. And so I try to do the proportionate thing. But hey, caught over taught.
Yeah.
So when I think about this in the context of work, like the times where we've had issues of negativity prop up in the company, I can usually see the source, and it's me.
Yikes.
I'm the problem. And so I always ask myself, like, am I distracted? Am I not involved enough? Am I being negative? And then everyone else is kind of just mirroring my own negativity. And, I think one of the things that you said in an episode last year was one of the things that you value in leadership is like a tempered spirit. Someone that doesn't get like too high or too low. And that really like convicted me because I know how important that is in leadership, but I'm also, as much as I am like the tempered leader, I'm also like the creative spirit. And we all know creative spirits are just like lunatics.
Right.
That's what makes us good at creativity.
Yeah.
But sometimes like in the history of our company, we've done a lot of therapy hour with Brady, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Where I come in and I'm like, you know what sucks? Everything. Stop what you're doing and listen.
Yes.
And look, through osmosis, it seems like maybe the team picks that up and perhaps starts to send it back to me. And I'm like, guys, why are we being negative here? They're like,
Yeah, I mean, the title of this episode is 8 Ways to Deal with Negative Church Staff. And so you assume that we're going to be pointing the fingers down towards the staff, but that's coming out of the gate, like pointing the finger back at us, the leader who sets the tone, and say, okay, if there's some negativity brooding, like where do we need to look for the source of this? And unfortunately, often, in some cases, it could be coming from the top down. It could be like a mirroring situation. And so, like most things in life, so imperative, but especially as leaders, to be self-aware first and foremost about what's going on in our life, in our mind, and our hearts, and our bodies, and how that may be reciprocated or mirrored by the people that we are trying to lead.
yeah, I have it written down, the famous wisdom, you become the average of the 5 people closest to you. So I asked myself, what am I contributing to that average? And the truth is,
Right, because you're one of those 5 people for... Yeah.
right. And when you are the leader, you might have a disproportionate sized influence relative to some of the others.
Sure.
That's possible. So I want to be a leader that models discipline, ambition, resilience, compassion. How can I expect those things from my team if I'm not already modeling that? And I can hear people thinking like, okay, I clicked on this episode because it said,
I've got some negative church staff.
and I want to deal with
I
them.
need to know what to do with them.
And you start by saying, you ever thought that you suck?
Yeah.
No, what we're saying is, look, we agree that right now with the negative person you're dealing with, this won't help. It will help with the next person though. Because if you begin to model these things, you can be confident that like you're not the source or at least the biggest source of the issue. So this might not help your issue today, but it will help the next one and the one after that and the one after that. And look, you know, if you had made these changes already, it would have helped the issue that you have right now. if we're being honest. Okay. Number 2, set the standard for communication. So first 2 rules are about setting standards. Why? Because people need to know the rules of the game. If you don't articulate what the rules of the game are, they'll invent their own rules. People think if I don't like set values, that's okay. Like we'll just like figure it out. No. If you don't set values explicitly, values will prop up just indirectly.
Yeah.
And because we're humans, we need to make sense of the chaos around us. And so we observe what's happening. And then if people aren't explicitly saying this is the principle, this is the value, we just observe and we go, okay, looks like based on what I'm seeing, this is the value.
And even worse, those values will prop up. They'll begin to guide the behavior of your team, but they'll be unspoken because you're not being explicit about them. And so your team, your staff in this case, will be operating under a value set, but no one's ever talked about it. And so imperative that you get out in front and set these standards preemptively so that you're all on the same page, working towards the same goals.
Because otherwise, you confront someone and they go like, what is this about?
Yeah.
This is totally counter to what I've observed, and you
Right.
never said anything, so
Right.
this seems like it was fine, and now you have resentment and bitterness because they feel like you were confronting and calling them out on things that like they were never even held to a standard to, and now there's also like this confusion amongst the staff. There's a lack of trust and belief in your leadership because you're holding people to account in ways that they were never set up to be held to account for. So here's what I do. 3 rules for communication. Number 1, disagreement is not disrespect. So the standard in this office is if we disagree with somebody else, we don't immediately interpret that as a disrespectful thing. We're disagreeing on a certain conversation. That is not in any way disrespect towards the other person's idea, disrespect towards the other person as a human being. This is simply a disagreement on this specific idea, this specific principle. Rule number 2, unity is not uniformity. We don't have the expectation that every one of us is going to identically agree with everything at the end of this conversation. In last week's episode, we talked about spending on the annual corporate retreat and how the team came to me and they were like, hey, here are some issues we have with this. And I said, here's the value that inspires this expenditure and here's why we do it. I don't think everyone came out of that and was like, I am 100% convinced.
Right.
What we came out of that with was, okay, I see the value that he has expressed that we have all agreed by. We agreed to the value. He is making a decision based on that value. I don't know if I fully agree with how with that decision, but I do agree with the value. And as the leader, I respect his call. I remember something that Tristan, my 0.5 best friend, because he lives too far away. Tristan, we're going to welcome you into the full best friend in 2024, hopefully. Tristan said, I trust your leadership, even though I don't agree with this decision. And I remember like stewing on that in a positive way. Maybe stewing implies like a negative focus on it. I was just thinking about it and I was like, okay, like that was a really important thing to hear because he was like, I trust you as a leader. I don't agree with this decision expressly, but I understand why you made it. I understand your thinking to arrive at it, and I defer to you.
Yeah.
Third rule for setting the standard for communication, say the quiet part out loud. We talked about this a
from
lot.
last week's episode.
We talked about it a lot. We won't go over it here. But so these are kind of my 3 rules for, I say set the standard for communication. You're like, well, what does that mean? 3 rules. Disagreement is not disrespect. Unity is not uniformity. Say the quiet part out loud. So we're communicating. There's an issue. I'm addressing Alex's negativity. Where you been? You haven't been in the office in 3 months.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. What are you doing? Now we have addressed the topic. What are the rules for how we are going to engage this conversation? There is conflict. There is bitterness. There is resentment. Okay, whatever. We want to root those things out. We want to get to a solution, a resolution. How are we going to talk about things? And then these are the 3 rules, kind of the rules for engagement. If you don't set the rules, another force or another person will.
Right.
Rules exist. Did you set them? If not, someone else did. Or just kind of a general force of people collectively.
Right.
Standard number 3, actually, I included the 3 rules in the number 8. So this is technically 5.
All right.
Look, we're playing it a little bit loose.
I don't think anyone's counting yet.
Next. Address all behavior or attitude issues in light of your church's values and mission. So last week, we talked about our organizational values. We talked about my personal and family values. When you have an issue, the only way to address it is in light of those values. The previous 4 items were like how you're going to talk about things. This is when you say, okay, this is the behavior, the unwanted behavior, the negativity, whatever it is. Why is it a problem? This is who I am. You know, I'm just a critical spirit. I'm really great at pointing out the flaws in things. That's who I am. What's the issue? You might see an issue. They don't see the issue. Now what? You have to bring it to the values of the organization.
That's right.
And what's really great about this, and we've talked about this in the context of creativity, project management, deciding what gets announced from a stage or not. The reason this is powerful is because it is now no longer a dance of conflict between Alex and I. It's really Alex and I trying to square our issue with one another against the values that we both believe in. We need to have common ground. The common ground is the values. You know, if you as a church are trying to figure out what gets announced from stage and you've all made the decision as a department, but also as a leadership team, unless this announcement applies to 50% or more of the church, we call it the 50% rule, we're not going to give it a church-wide promotion, email, stage announcement. Now, if Alex comes to me and he says, hey, I want to share this, this thing with the church, and it doesn't hit that rule, it's not like I've shut down Alex.
Right.
We all agreed to this rule, and we're really just measuring his request against this rule. Conflict can work the same way. These are our values that we want to embody and live by. So now it's not me saying, Alex, your behavior is unacceptable. And he goes, yeah, well, you're ugly. He doesn't go, why is it unacceptable? I disagree. Right. Okay. So now it's not me against him. It's the issue against the values. The values are the common ground. And that creates this third-party, objective, impartial document. This is what the Supreme Court does, right? There's an issue. The smaller courts have been like, this is what we've decided. But another court says, this is what we've decided. Supreme Court, you need to make a decision. And they're like, all right, well, is it constitutional? Right. We're just here to basically figure out if this issue against the Constitution lines up. It's not about what I believe personally, hopefully. It's not about what this other justice with maybe a different political bent believes. We are trying to figure out, according to this Constitution, how can we apply this objective, impartial document to the current issue we are facing right now.
Well, and this is not foreign to any of us who have been Christians for any amount of time or practiced faith in church for any amount of time, because we have a document of sorts that sometimes we interpret differently, but we have this rich tradition of our faith recorded in the scriptures. And in so many different areas of our life and our church, we hold up our behavior, our decision-making against the history of our faith, up against the scriptures, and say, okay, how does it align with the life and story of Jesus? And so we're doing this already and on like a grand scale. Now in the workplace, we're highlighting how important it is to have your own set of values, which last week we mentioned are usually informed by the scriptures anyways, that you can hold your decision-making, your behavior in some senses up against and say, okay, how does this align or not align? And if it's not aligned, how can we work together interpersonally to get back on track?
Precisely. And, you might not have in your values like something directly related to this issue.
Right.
Right? Like someone is being negative. Maybe you don't have in your values. We are not negative.
Right.
So what you have to do is you basically have to make your case that this behavior, this attitude and perspective will lead to these results, and then hold up those results against one of the values. Like our goal is to, see life change in our city through X, Y, and Z. If we have a negative view on our city, that is going to affect this outcome that we're trying to achieve together. And you basically make the case that this behavior negatively affects this message. So it's not about like, I don't like it when you act this way. It's about, we have all agreed in this organization that this is what we're trying to do. Yep. And this type of behavior will negatively impact that.
Right.
Next up, earn equity. When was the last time you talked with this person on the team? Just to talk. There's the parenting, mantra, 5 positives for every 1 negative. That's the ideal ratio. Let me tell you, I'm not hitting this ratio. But I do remind myself, hey, if all you do is ever harp on the negative, what's that going to lead to?
Yeah.
You're not going to have earned the equity to speak to that person because all you do is chastise them. Or you're always coming to them with something that's Look, frankly, this is me preaching to myself on this because I have this natural resistance towards anything that feels phony. I'm really bad at small talk because I'm like, what are we doing here? It feels performative or it feels like something to basically bide time or it's necessary to then get to the real stuff. And as I get older, I feel like I'm starting to understand it a bit more, but I still kind of recoil at it a little bit. How are you with that? I feel like as a pastor, you're always schmoozing and I'm like, I have nothing to say to you.
Yeah. So you and I are similar in so many different ways. This is one of them. The way that I am growing in this area is to learn how to ask better questions and actually be invested in the response. And so it's taken time. It takes a lot of patience to ask inquisitive questions and simply wait for the response and actually practice caring about what the other person is saying. And the relational equity gets forged over time by showing someone with your body language, your eye contact, your presence, your patience that you do care, you are listening. But when it comes to negative people, that's really challenging. And the question here for earning equity is when was the last time you spent time with this person or talked with them just to talk? And with negative folks, that's really challenging because sometimes negative people are really good at their work. And so you like the work that they do and how they work for you or for the church or for the organization. And so sometimes it's just easier to let them do their work and not engage with them interpersonally. But this is where, as a leader, you really get to practice selflessness, this self-sacrificial kind of Christ-like posture, which is, I care about you and your personhood more than I care about your work. And it's going to take a lot of effort, often silent effort for me to come to you, to be close to you, to be close to the negativity and show you that I care. But if you care more about this person than you do about their work and you want to forge a relationship over time and, all in Christian love, in the spirit of Christian love, that's what it's going to take. And that's part of being a leader in a community or a leader on a team. Sometimes, in some cases, a bit more of a selfless posture than is required from other folks who just show up or whatever. But so far in my experience as a Christian leader, in my estimation, I think that's what it requires. It's, I think, a lifelong learning process. I think I'm just starting to learn about it now. So yeah, I have, maybe everyone does, but I have a strong aversion to negative folks, or to their negativity, not to their personhood, right? And so, I'm learning, I'm catching myself, and we've talked about it already. We'll continue to talk about it. There's usually, if not always, a source to that negativity that needs to kind of be sussed out.
Right.
But the person, there's gold there, and so it takes work to work that out.
And to be clear, in respect to my critique or lack of love for small talk, it's not that I don't understand the steps to getting to really substantive conversation, right? You don't just go straight to, unless you have a long history with that person, incredibly deep places. There's that warming up process.
Yeah.
Small talk on its own is what bothers me.
Yeah.
It's hey, we're kind of just treading water. We're not actually going anywhere together. We're just kind of again, biding time. That's what I don't care for. So earning equity, again, preaching to myself here, not something that I have always, even now, embody in the best way. Because as I recently came to an understanding of, I really like to work alone. I like to kind of get in my creative lab and I don't like to be disturbed. And I just like to do my thing. And I just I'm a lone wolf in that way. Which really does fly in the face to so many of my hey, I want to be friends. I want to be friends. I just don't want to work collaboratively. I want to work in isolation. And then once work's done, let's be friends. But just,
Right.
we have to work collaboratively. This is a group project. Let me do it. I'm going to do the project. Guys, I have a long way to go. In respect to equity, it's not just how much time. I have 3 items here. When was the last time you talked with a person? Just talk. Yes, we explored that. When was the last time you called this person out for their good work or acknowledged their efforts?
Yeah.
So there are
That goes a long way.
Absolutely. And there are 2 levers to pull here. Their effort. Maybe the outcome wasn't exactly like what we had hoped for, but hey, you worked really hard on this. I saw your effort. Thank you for that. Or outcome. Maybe they didn't even work that hard on it. But hey, look, we achieved the results we want. Way to go. The outcome was achieved. And then third, how long have you known this person? Have you gone through fires together with this person? So if you're thinking about dealing with the negativity, run through these 3 questions in your head. Okay, when was the last time we talked and it wasn't related to performance, or it wasn't related to them doing what I've asked? And second, when was the last time I acknowledged their good effort and the great results we've had? And then third, how long have I known this person? If you've known them a long time, you might not have to lean on the first 2 as much. Right? If Alex and I are having an issue, I don't feel in the same way I have to go to him. Just so you know, really appreciated all the effort you've put in lately. It's not going to notice. But also, here's why you suck. We've gone through a lot together. You can get to those places quicker with people. If you haven't gone through a lot together, maybe it's those previous 2. And then finally, assess capacity. One of the root issues, now that we've gone through hey, look at yourself, consider the relationship with the person, address behaviors in light of the mission and the vision. Okay, oftentimes, once we get through all this, one of the root issues is misaligned expectations. Meaning, you are observing one thing that the staff member has no idea is a problem, that the person on the team, the volunteer, has no idea is an issue at all. I think a lot of the times, we observe behavior and we okay, this happened once. I'm not going to go to them once. It's happened twice. Okay, still, I'm going to make sure 3 or 4 times there's a pattern of behavior here, and I know they know what's going on, and they don't seem to care. And then you go to them, and they're like, what are you talking about? You're like, oh, I was imbuing all of this negativity on you, ironically. You were purposefully skirting the line, purposefully not completing the job. It was just misaligned. Your expectation was different from mine, and that was the root of all of it. So sometimes it's a behavioral thing. And I think I've shared this once before, but I like to do a bit of a sick and twisted experiment. Okay, if I've gone through all these things and there's just immaturity that I would like to root out. I don't know if this is a good idea. I feel like it worked in the one time that I tried it. The problem is that I work with a lot of great people and I don't really have any problems with them. But I'm sure it will come up again. So what I do is I give them a project. This is the first step. The key is with this project, it has to be challenging, meaning there will be 1 of 3 outcomes. Outcome number 1, the person rises to the occasion, giving you an opportunity to praise them for how great they did and changing the tone and trajectory of the relationship. I find with negativity, the problem with it is you just feel like it's just going to stay negative. It's not we did a project together and the outcome wasn't ideal. It's everything that we approach together just has this nasty aura about it. So that's the first possible outcome. The second possible outcome is the person realizes that they can't get this project done and comes to ask for help, giving you the opportunity to work collaboratively and hopefully...
Which you love.
I'm not. No, I then hand it off to you. But hopefully you get the opportunity, as I recently have.
Yes.
Hopefully it humbles this person in the process a bit to help them see a little bit of what you see.
And you get to work together towards a solution.
Exactly. Or the third outcome, they stubbornly force their way through the project, refusing to ask for help and failing on the project miserably because the project was such a difficult thing in the first place, which is embarrassing as everyone sees it, hopefully getting them, again, to that same place of humbling them a little bit. So of the potential outcomes, either they do a great job and you get to change the tone and trajectory of the relationship, but also just the general aura around this person. Or secondly, they come to a place of humility a little bit, which allows you also to change the trajectory of the relationship. So the whole point is negativity is this indefinite trajectory that everyone can see and you don't know how to root it out. You create this experiment, manufacture this project to basically create 1 of 3 outcomes, it's their call. They get to figure out which of the door they want to take. But either way, on the other side, you should have the opportunity to change the trajectory of the relationship.
That's so good. And you're batting 1,000 on that one.
I'm 1 for 1.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Exactly. Just one final note here that I.
And one final note. Fire them.
Oh, right. Right. The ninth thing to do is to just let them go. And listen, you know what? We're not the biggest experts on transitioning people.
Yeah, that's fair.
We did a conversation last year with William Vanderbloemen, who is, in charge of staffing all the churches in the world, it seems. And he had a lot to say about, like, clearly he's had experience firsthand with, like, hey, it's time to go.
Okay, but what about transitioning folks, like interdepartment wise? Surely there's a situation where there's some negativity coming up and just friction in the workplace or the job, and maybe their skill sets are just misaligned, and that requires some effort from you as the leader to recognize, like, okay, this person is an asset. They're a valuable member of our faith community. They deserve their employment here, but in this area, in this department, it's not working. How can we creatively find a solution to maybe transition them, like, interdepartmentally, not just transition them out of a job, but transition them to another job where maybe the fit just wasn't right. So surely there's space for that to be true, like where the negativity is coming up because maybe this shoe just isn't quite fitting, but maybe there is another shoe in this workplace that is meant for you.
Yeah, and the more you earn equity with someone, the more that you come to understand their personality and the way that they operate, you might be able to find another need that they can fill.
Yeah.
The challenge is you don't want to, like, shuffle the deck to basically move them out of one place where they're creating an issue to just kind of like reclaim that area, but then they're kind of floating, or they're just negatively impacting something else, right? The bigger the organization, the more that we see this, like HR will, like, move someone off of one project and they'll just, like, create a problem for somebody else, basically. In churches, you don't have that same level of stratification amongst the organization, right? Like, you might have the lead pastor and, like, the executive and, like, the children's volunteer and the youth volunteer. And it's like everyone's wearing multiple hats anyway, and so you're, like, so intertwined and intimate with one another, it becomes even that much more complex. Which is why I usually try to get to, like, the personality, because, like, in church, rarely are we, like, doing things where, like, it's the perfect fit. Like, the whole point of church is very similar, and this is why we talk a lot about our own organization. It's like a startup, right? Where it's like, we hired all these people because, like, we get along. Do we have the skill set? I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go, right? Like, every single person listening to this is going, like, I didn't know what I was doing when I was put in charge of social media, right? And that's why it's always like competency is second to character. It's like, if you have the character, we can develop the competency. If you don't have the character, the competency doesn't even matter. And that's, what we talk about the airport test being. Like, I don't care how great and skilled you are. I don't care about your work pedigree. When I get on a call with you, when I spend time with you, I'm miserable. And so those other things, like, I don't even care about as much. And so I think there's definitely merit to what you're describing, but in church where everything is so, it's not siloed.
Yeah.
Everything is like, hey, we're all in this together. That negativity, I think, spills over anywhere.
Yeah, surely.
What a great ending note. Thanks for that. Do you have any, personal experience with this, like in the church world, like with volunteers or with, I know staff is, again, you're in, a typical size church. So there's yourself and your dad in terms of, on staff, but shuffling volunteers, negative spirit, what you've seen and done firsthand.
Yeah. So far in my experience of working with volunteers, leading volunteers for the last 10 years, I'm trying to think very quickly over the course of that time and all of the different ways I've encountered and worked through negativity like this. Almost, I can't say positively every circumstance, but almost every circumstance has been rooted in, like, unspoken expectations from the top down, like from right. So, like, I have unspoken expectations of the volunteer, and they're not meeting them, and that's causing friction. And sometimes the negativity is not from the bottom up; it's being, like, imputed, like, from me down. Or they feel the the friction because they're not meeting my unspoken expectations, so they're not feeling valued, and the resentment starts to build. And so a lot of it has been rooted in that very thing of unspoken, resulting in unmet expectations. But that's because I didn't make them clear. So that's on me. And any solution that I have found or we have found has always come in and through personal work, personal investment, that earning equity of me valuing the person over their performance, and repairing the relationship before trying to repair like their attitude about the work we're trying to do.
Right.
And because it's the relationship that sustains. We've talked about it on this episode. We talked about it last week. Like going through fires together, and that relational equity is what enables you to take steps forward and then eventually start running forward together as a team, as a church. Like you said, our church is small. We're like, everyone has their hands in the pot. We're all just doing what we need to do to keep the thing going. And so this pops up, and investing interpersonally into those relationships is always my priority, because I value that person's personhood and their presence so much more than what I value their work to be, that if they never did the work ever again, I still value them as a member of our community. And so prioritizing that has really helped alleviate almost all negativity that has cropped up. Because it comes from different sources. There are different reasons that people feel undervalued or underappreciated or not seen or uncomfortable in the work they're doing, whatever. We can work through that. But if they know that they're loved and valued as a person first and foremost, that really sets the stage for moving through that stuff together.
I think there's a really important addendum to this conversation, which is, I feel like people are listening, watching this and going like, yeah, like this entire episode is about like, you, the leader, need to be better. Like, you don't know the difficult person that I have to deal with. And I think it's important to be clear that my belief of my own organization is that there are more skilled people that could be in virtually every position that we have, save for a small handful across the 25 people in the company. So it's not like we have the perfect all-star cast of extreme character and extreme competency across everything, and we're like, if you just look in the mirror, things will fix. And churches are like, you don't understand how difficult it is. I just don't consider it an option to like abandon people. And so when I neglect that option altogether, what do I have to do? I can look in the mirror and I can say, what can you control? How can you improve? How can you set the standard? How can you embody the person and the leader you want to be, and understand that over time through osmosis that will be picked up? And how can you identify the negative traits amidst the culture and realize that they are simply reflections and mirrors of what you have already done yourself? Don't say it's about somebody else. Don't put that on them. Put it on yourself. We talked in last week's episode. Sometimes in life, greater demands are given to you, not to them. You can like get rid of them and think you eliminated the problem, and maybe you did. But I don't ever even consider that an option. This is the cast that I have, because all I care about is doing life with people for the long term. We are an unusual for-profit organization in that way. But churches are always that way. The whole point of the church is, this is the bride of Christ. We are journeying together. And yes, it can get a little bit messy when like we have employment and we have like, you're getting paid by the church. And then we start to act a little bit maybe too much like enterprise. And maybe this is ironic coming from the enterprise saying, stop acting like an enterprise church, act like us, the enterprise, which is trying to act like a church. Yeah. But I'm just like, these are my people. And they stuck with me and I'm stuck with them. And these are the concessions we have to make. We don't have these skills. And we have these issues. And in the family, this is the stuff that we have to deal with. And this person's always going to be this way a bit, and I'm always going to be this way a bit. So how can I be a bit better? And in that effort, call them to be a bit better. And how can we not look at what we have in lack, because we all have lack, and instead, like, hey, this is who we are, and this is what we have that's great. I have found that the more time I spend with others, the more grateful I am for the people that I have here. And when I didn't spend time with others, I would just get focused on like, this is what I wish was different in the company. I spend time with others and I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty good. Now, that isn't to say that you just, think about, oh, the grass is always greener at the other side. But if you forfeit in your mind the option of just like removing the issues. Because that's what we all dream of, right? If I could just remove this person and get rid of this attitude in this person. It's like, that's not how life works. These are real people. And you're lying to yourself if you don't think they don't think the same things about you. This is who we have. This is who we are. How can we all take steps to be better and hold ourselves to these standards and have these standards for communication and not just look for the quick fix of like axing a person or one character attribute about them.
Yeah, and what you're describing, I'm reminded of the Apostle Paul. He describes it as like working out your own salvation. You know, what you're describing to me is like, okay, prioritizing my own Christ-likeness, my own Christian character, hoping that will be reciprocated, mirrored by the community and by our staff, by our volunteers. But here's the thing about this, for anyone who's worked in church, or anyone who's lived life, we know that you could work out your salvation as much as humanly possible. You could be the supreme vision of Christ-likeness and Christian character. You will not bat 1,000 in the sense of people reciprocating that type of salvation work. There will be folks who will not be willing to work out their own salvation to that measure, and they will, in my experience, inevitably fall away. I'm not saying in the sense from the faith, but they will not accept the call to be transformed from glory to glory, and they will move on and they'll find another faith community. And those types of folks, until they accept that call, that behavior is often recycled. You'll hear from that community, oh, this person is behaving in the same way. And, oh, they're in another church now because the last one. Right. And it's like, you can't, even Jesus didn't bat 1,000. There were lots of folks who fell away when they heard what he had to say and how he was living his life. And so yes, we must accept our personal responsibility while not assuming that to the degree that we accept our personal responsibility, everyone else will reciprocate it in the same way. There will be folks who fall away, and that is life, that's church, that's faith, and you let them go in the grace of God. Know that the grace of God is holding them, and that God is performing his own work in and through them, while you accept your own responsibility to work out your own salvation.
That is a very sober-minded closing thought. So we will thank you for your time, attention, and trust. We'll talk to you next week.
Negative church staff, fire them.
Yep. Yeah, you just gotta let them go.